Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting practical, focusing on something I know is top of mind for many service pros out there. We're tackling how to stop, you know, chasing those smaller gigs and actually fill your calendar with really high-value workshop clients. That's the goal. So we've got a solid six-step client acquisition system we're going to walk through, specifically designed for workshop facilitators. If you're ready to define your value and, frankly, professionalize your whole client process, well, this deep dive is for you. Today's focus: how to fill your calendar with high-value workshop clients.
Yeah, this is so important because, look, too many facilitators end up being, well, kind of a commodity, right? They're just the generic choice, taking whatever comes along. What we want to do with this system is totally flip that. It's about attracting clients who have very specific problems and see you as the precise solution, not just another facilitator. Get this right, and your efficiency, your conversion rates, they just shoot up. Okay, let's unpack the system step by step.
All right, step one. This feels foundational. It's all about getting super precise with targeting. The idea is defining your niche using what's called the three-lens positioning. So what exactly are these three lenses?
Think of it like your unique fingerprint in the market. Lens number one, your specific target industry. You just can't be everything to everyone. You have to choose. Lens two is the specific challenge you solve within that industry. And it needs to be really specific, not just communication issues. Maybe it's reducing friction in newly merged remote teams or something like that. And the third lens, maybe the most critical, is your unique method.
Yeah.
How do you solve that problem differently? When those three things overlap, that's when you become indispensable.
Okay, that makes sense. It immediately sets you apart. But let's get more granular on the client profile itself. We're aiming for high value. What kind of organizational metrics should we be looking for?
Yeah, you want to hit that sweet spot. We're talking organizations typically with around 25 to 200 employees. They really need to be in expansion phase. They're growing, right? Which means they're hitting new growing pains, new challenges that often need outside help. And of course, they have clear communication or team issues that are actually hindering that growth.
25 to 200 employees. Why that specific range? Why not aim for, the huge Fortune 500 companies? Are we leaving money on the table there?
That's a really common question, and it's a good one. Here's why that size often works best. Companies in that 25 to 200 range, they usually don't have a massive internal learning and development department already in place. If you go after a company with, say, 5,000 employees, you're often competing against their own internal team. It's tough.
Right.
But in that smaller growing company, you can essentially become their outsourced L&D expert. You're vital. Plus, these companies usually need results quicker. And critically, they often have decision makers who could approve budgets in that, say, $3,000 to $10,000 range without going through layers and layers of bureaucracy.
Got it. So it's optimizing for need, decision speed, and budget access. Makes sense. So once we've got this crystal clear profile, where do we actually find these ideal clients?
You've got to go where they're actively looking for solutions, not just scrolling LinkedIn randomly. Research industry-specific professional networks. Find out which conferences they attend specifically to solve these kinds of growth problems. Look at digital learning platforms where they might be researching solutions themselves. Focusing your energy there means you're not wasting time. You're putting your message right in front of people with the need and the authority.
Okay, so we know who they are, where they hang out. That leads us straight into step two. Attraction, value, and crucially, qualification. How do we draw them in and then quickly figure out if they're a good fit? Starts with the value statement, right?
Absolutely. That one sentence has to do a lot of heavy lifting. If they can't grasp your value almost instantly, poof, they're gone. It needs to nail three things. Who exactly do you help? What specific pain or problem do you solve? And what's your approach? So something like, I help mid-sized tech companies scale their sales teams by eliminating onboarding friction using my proprietary 5-step framework. It's memorable, specific, and it acts like an immediate filter.
And to keep attracting them over time, we need to show our expertise before they even reach out. What kind of content really works for that?
You need content that showcases your thinking, your methodology, and ideally, results. Write short, sharp posts about common workshop pitfalls, maybe the top 3 mistakes facilitators make in virtual workshops. Share little video snippets of successful activities, if appropriate, but maybe even more important. Get involved in industry discussions online. Add value. Comment thoughtfully. Position yourself as the expert in that very specific niche you defined.
Okay, content establishes authority. Now let's talk about protecting our time, the screening process. This is where we separate the serious prospects from well, the tire kickers. What are the definite green lights we're looking for, and what are the big red flags that tell us to walk away?
You absolutely have to have your screening hat on during those first conversations. Green lights. Look for people who ask really thoughtful, specific questions. It shows they've actually thought about their problem. They mention challenges that perfectly match your niche expertise. They state clearly who the decision maker is or that they are the decision maker. And this is key. They understand that solving this problem requires a real investment. They're not just price shopping.
And the red flags?
Oh, the red flags can be subtle sometimes, but a big one is anyone whose first question is basically, what's your cheapest price? Or, even worse, the ones who say, just, send over a generic proposal so we could take a look. That's often code for, we want free consulting. Actually, I had someone ask me once to send the detailed agenda from a workshop I did for another client so they could, quote, review it internally to see if they needed me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge red flag. They're trying to get your intellectual property for free. You have to spot those early and just politely disengage. They'll drain your time and likely never convert.
Right. Filter them out fast. Okay. So we've screened, we've got a green light. Now we're into step 3. Crafting winning proposals. This isn't just a price list, is it? It's a persuasion tool. What's the structure that really builds confidence?
Yeah, think of it as the final confidence builder. We rely on a simple but powerful 3-part structure. Problem, solution, outcome. Part 1, restate the client's challenge and use their exact language if you can. It proves you listen deeply and you get their specific pain. Part 2, clearly explain your workshop methodology, but specifically link it to their situation, their context. And Part 3, describe the specific measurable outcomes they can expect. What's going to be different for their team or their business in, say, the next 3 to 6 months because of this workshop?
That leads right into customization. We've all gotten those generic copy-paste proposals. Why is sending one of those basically career suicide when you're dealing with high-value clients?
Because it sends the absolute wrong message. A generic proposal screams, your problem isn't unique, and neither is my solution. High-value clients are paying a premium for bespoke expertise, for someone who understands their nuances. If your proposal doesn't directly address their specific team dynamics, their unique market challenges, and explain precisely how your method solves their stated goals, well, you immediately undermine all the trust you built. Customization isn't optional. It's the price of admission for premium work.
Makes perfect sense. And what about proof? We need to bake social proof into this proposal too, right? To lower that perceived risk for them.
Absolutely. And make it relevant. Use testimonials, ideally short video ones, or detailed case studies from organizations that are similar to the prospects, similar size, similar industry, similar challenge. If you're just starting out and don't have direct client examples yet, leverage your past professional experience. Maybe you led a significant internal project at a previous job that demonstrates the core skills needed. That's still valid proof of your expertise.
Okay, proposal sent. Now we hit step 4, handling objections and closing. This can be the tricky part. Clients almost always have objections: price, timing, maybe bad past experiences. How do we prepare for that conversation?
Preparation is everything here. You need to anticipate the common ones and have clear, well-reasoned answers ready. The big 3 are usually, it costs too much, we need some time to think it over, or we've done workshops before, they didn't really stick. But here's the critical part. You have to dig underneath the surface objection to understand the real concern. It's almost never just about the money. It's usually about risk, or doubt about the value, or fear it won't actually work for them. So if they say it's too expensive, your prepared response shouldn't just defend the price. It should pivot the conversation back to the cost of not solving the problem they have. Frame it as an investment, not an expense.
That's smart. Address the underlying fear, not just the words. But what about that classic stall? We need to think about it. How do we prevent the deal from just fading away after that?
Yeah, the think about it abyss. Don't just leave it hanging. Propose a specific next step. Suggest a brief follow-up call in, say, a week, and explicitly ask if it would be helpful to include any other stakeholders or decision makers in that call. This does 2 things. It keeps the momentum going, and it helps prevent your message from getting diluted or misinterpreted as it goes through their internal grapevine. Also, if you sense doubt is the real issue behind thinking about it, proactively offer to connect them with a reference from a similar company you've helped. That directly tackles the risk factor.
Good strategies. Okay, moving to step 5, contracts and setting expectations. This is about protection for both sides. What are the must-have elements in a professional contract?
Non-negotiable. Your contract is your safety net. It absolutely must clearly define the scope of work, And crucially, explicitly state that your preparation time is part of the work being paid for. You need clear cancellation and rescheduling policies, what happens if they need to change dates, and probably most important for your cash flow, a specific payment schedule. My strong recommendation, structure it to cover your prep time up front, something like 50% due upon signing the contract that secures the date and pays for your initial work, and the remaining 50% due maybe 1 week before the workshop date. Don't wait until after delivery for the final payment.
That 50-50 split before the event even happens makes a lot of sense, protects your investment of time.
Okay, final piece before the actual workshop, the pre-workshop discovery call. How do we make sure this call sets the stage for a really smooth and impactful session? This call needs to be a real deep dive, focusing on the human element. Use this time to understand the group dynamics. Who are the key influencers? Are there potential resistors or known conflicts within the team? What are the hidden agendas, if any? You also need to nail down all of the logistics. Don't assume anything. Confirm exactly who is providing what projector, screen, flip charts, specific software access for virtual sessions. Get clarity on room setup, timing, breaks. Ironing out these details beforehand prevents those awkward time-wasting hiccups on the day itself.
All right, the workshop was great, client's happy, you're paid. But the job's not really done, is it? That brings us to the final step, step 6. Follow up and cultivating future business. What does a strong post-workshop follow-up actually look like?
This is where so many facilitators drop the ball, and it's where the easiest repeat business comes from. You need a structured follow-up plan. Develop templates for follow-up packages. These should include things like a concise summary of the session, clearly outlined action items with assigned owners, maybe links to extra resources, and critically, schedule specific check-in points. A quick call or email about 48 hours after the workshop just to check initial reactions. Then a more formal review maybe a week or two later to discuss implementation of the action items and, importantly, to start exploring what the next challenge is that you could help them with.
And to manage all this, the initial leads, the proposals, the follow-ups, the potential repeat business, especially as you get busier, we need systems, right? We can't just rely on memory.
Oh, absolutely not. Relying on memory is a recipe for disaster. You must implement some kind of tracking system. It could be a dedicated CRM or even just a well-organized spreadsheet to start. You need to track every lead, every conversation, proposal status, follow-up dates, everything. This isn't just admin work, it's professional relationship management. It prevents valuable opportunities from falling through the cracks. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these systems aren't just about organization, they become your feedback loop. You start seeing patterns, what kind of leads convert best, which proposals land, where follow-up is most effective. That data helps you refine your entire process and scale smartly.
So that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Through this whole 6-step system, moving from, maybe vague targeting and chasing deals to a really structured, professional approach, covering everything from finding the right clients to closing them and managing the relationship long term.
Exactly. The core idea behind this entire system is shifting from chasing clients to attracting them. When you clearly define your unique value, when you professionalize every single touch point from that initial screening call right through to contract execution and follow-up, you naturally draw in the clients who value your specific expertise and are ready to invest in it. It's a fundamental shift.
Okay, so now that you understand the importance of tracking each stage, here's something I want you, the listener, to think about. Are you actively noticing and maybe even tracking the type of communication that precedes your best deals? I mean, the specific questions prospects ask you early on, the language they use to describe their pain points, even the tone of their first email. Is there a pattern in the communication that leads to your most successful, say, $10,000 contracts? Because if you're not looking at that level of detail, well, that's probably where your next big insight for growing your business lies. Definitely something to chew on. Apply this knowledge, professionalize your client acquisition process, and start filling that calendar. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.